Welcome back, everybody. I'm Sassy Pants, wife to Matty the rancher, and I'll be your storyteller today. Welcome to Adventures with Sodak Pete, stories that celebrate the hard work, big hearts, and wide open spaces of ranch life. Out here, every day's an adventure, and we hope each and every one of you watching can imagine yourself as little Sodak Pete, learning the ropes, getting your hands a little dirty, and helping out where it counts. So grab your boots and tip your hats, and let's see what today's adventure has in store. Sodak Pete, fun on the ranch, a day off. The smell of eggs and toast filled the kitchen. Pete sat at the table with Millie curled at his feet. Matty grabbed his coffee and he said, "I've got errands to run in town, Pete. Looks like you and Millie have the day off." Pete's blue eyes lit up and Millie's tails wagged in excitement. After Pete finished his breakfast, he and Millie headed out to the warm morning sun. Pete wheeled his old bike out of the shed, brushed off the dust, and he climbed on. "Come on, Millie," he called. Pete zipped around the barn several times, gravel crunching under his tires while Millie bounded after him. Soon they headed down the long driveway, Millie racing beside in the cloud of dust. Pete stood on his pedals, legs were pumping hard. At the big ranch gate, they paused. Pete leaned on his handlebars, kind of catching his breath. "Let's turn her back, girl," he said with a grin, and together they raced home. When they got back into the yard, Pete was ready for some target practice. He lined up the row of tin cans like shiny little targets on top of the fence posts. Then he set up his BB gun, steadying himself for the shot. Ping! A can jumped and tumbled into the grass. Millie barked. She was sure proud of Pete. Pete was starting to look for a little more of a challenge, so he hung a piece of cardboard on the fence post with a bullseye drawn right in the middle in black marker. Pete lifted his gun, he squinted, and then he pulled the trigger. Plink! Right near the middle. He gave Millie a scratch. "Pretty good shooting, huh, girl?" he said with a smile. When he was done practicing, Pete put his BB gun away in the house, and he was ready for some adventure. On the table sat a sack lunch that I had packed for him. Sandwich, apple, and a cookie tucked inside. Pete grabbed it with a grin. "Thanks," he called out. "Come on, Millie, we've got exploring to do." They wandered past the garden and followed the trail through the tall grass and the wildflowers. Dragonflies were buzzing above their head and the sun was shining. Over the hill, the creek lay quiet and clear. Smooth stones lined the bank, shining in the sun. Pete picked up a flat one and gave it a fling off to the side. 1, 2, 3 skips before it sank with a plop. Millie splashed in, making her own ripples. Pete crossed the creek, stepping rock to rock with a big grin on his face and his arms out for balance. Millie, she just jumped right into the creek, loving the water. On the other side, Pete laughed. "It's just us in the creek today, Millie." They plopped down under a shade tree by the water's edge and they shared their sack lunch that I'd packed. Pete ate his sandwich and his apple, saving a few bites of his cookie to share with Millie. After they finished their lunch, Pete and Millie wandered toward the hayfield. Then in the distance, Pete spotted some big round bales lined up at the edge of the field. "Millie, let's go climbing," he said as his eyes lit up. When they got to the bales, up they scrambled. Pete pulled with his hands in his boots. Millie bounded up close behind him. Then they leapt from bale to bale, laughing as they slid down the sides and scrambled right back up again. It was like their own ranch playground. Finally, they stretched out on top of a bale, catching their breath. From up there, the ranch spread wide out. Fields, fences, and cows grazing below. Pete leaned on his elbows, just relaxing and enjoying the view with Millie by his side. For just a moment, it felt like they were at the top of the world. As the sun started to set, Pete and Millie made their way back home. The smell of wood smoke drifted on the breeze. Pete thought, I wonder what Matty's doing. Matty was stacking firewood and getting the campfire going. "Hope you two didn't get into too much mischief," he said with a wink. Flames flickered to life as evening settled in. Pete cooked a hot dog on a stick. Matty leaned back in his chair, and I joined them with a blanket around my shoulders and all the fixins to make s'mores. Millie curled close to the fire. Her eyes were half shut in the glow. The stars blinked awake above us, the fire crackled, the sparks floated high, and we were all enjoying the s'mores. Our hands were sticky from the marshmallows, and our stomachs were full. And that's how our day ended. A ranch boy and his dog sharing all their stories and all their adventures and the snacks by the fire with folks who love them. A day not for chores, just for fun. And a thankful night under the South Dakota stars, grateful for the ranch adventures and for each other. Thanks for riding along with us today. Sodak Pete and I hope you'll join us on our next adventure.